every weapon used by the British SAS elite warfare. The British Special Air Service, known across the world simply as the SAS, was never meant to fight wars the way others did. It was built to operate where order collapsed, where rules stopped applying, and where survival depended not on numbers, but on precision, speed, and ruthless adaptability. From the moment the regiment was conceived, it rejected the idea of standard issue solutions. There was no single rifle, no fixed loadout, no sacred piece of equipment. Weapons were tools, cold, disposable instruments chosen for one reason only: whether they worked when everything else failed. When David Stirling formed the SAS in 1941, warfare was still dominated by mass formations and predictable doctrine. Armies advanced in lines, defended airfields routinely, and in assumed rear areas were safe. Stirling saw this as a weakness. His vision was simple and terrifying. Small teams would strike deep behind enemy lines, hitting targets that believed themselves untouchable. These were not battles of attrition. They were raids designed to destroy morale, disrupt logistics, and vanish before retaliation could arrive. Speed mattered. Surprise mattered. Violence had to be immediate and overwhelming. During these early North African raids, the Thompson submachine gun became one of the regiment's first true instruments of shock. Heavy, unforgiving, and brutally effective, the Thompson fired .45 caliber rounds that hit with absolute authority at close range. SAS operators moved across enemy airfields at night, eliminating guards, destroying aircraft engines, and igniting fuel dumps in minutes. And in those moments, elegance meant nothing. What mattered was certainty. When the trigger was pulled, resistance ended. The Thompson delivered that certainty with brutal reliability. But the desert was only the beginning. As the war expanded into jungles and mountains, the SAS faced a new enemy: environmental failure. Tropical warfare destroyed weapons silently. Moisture crept into actions. Mud clogged magazines. Heat warped components. Rifles that worked perfectly in training failed catastrophically in the field. In this unforgiving reality, reliability became sacred. This is where the Owen gun earned its reputation. Borrowed from Australian forces, it was awkward, heavy, and visually unrefined. But it refused to stop working. Its top-mounted magazine kept ammunition clear of dirt and water. Its simple blowback system continued cycling even when soaked, dropped, or abused. In jungles like Borneo, where finely tuned weapons died quietly, the Owen kept firing. For SAS operators moving through dense vegetation with no backup, that reliability was not a luxury. It was survival. Alongside it came the Sten gun. Crude, cheaply produced, and often mocked, the Sten was never designed to be admired. It was designed to be hidden. Broken down into components, it could be concealed in packs during parachute insertions behind enemy lines. For sabotage missions, this mattered more than accuracy or durability. The Sten allowed SAS teams to infiltrate quietly, assemble weapons only at the last moment, strike suddenly, and disappear before the enemy understood what had happened. It was not a weapon of sustained combat, and it was a weapon of disruption. The M3 grease gun offered another lesson in restraint. Its slow, cyclic rate allowed deliberate, controlled fire in confined spaces. Instead of emptying magazines in seconds, operators could place rounds precisely, conserving ammunition in environments where resupply was impossible. It was ugly, simple, and effective. The kind of weapon the SAS trusted instinctively. By the 1950s, the Stirling submachine gun emerged as a long-term companion. Its curved magazine fed reliably even when caked with sand, dust, or mud. SAS units carried it across multiple conflicts, from the Radfan Mountains to the Falklands War. Suppressed variants became critical during covert operations in Oman, where night raids demanded near-total silence. In those missions, sound was exposure. Muzzle flash was death. Yet the Stirling allowed SAS operators to kill without announcing their presence. Then came 1980. The Iranian embassy siege in London dragged the SAS into the global spotlight. The assault was brief, violent, and decisive. What the world saw was not chaos, but control. Operators moved with precision, cleared rooms methodically, and eliminated threats without hesitation. The weapon that defined that night was the Heckler & Koch MP5. Its roller-delayed blowback system allowed unmatched controllability. Operators could fire accurately even on automatic, placing rounds exactly where intended. After that operation, counterterrorism warfare changed forever. But the SAS never believed in legends. Weapons were tested constantly, and many failed. The Ingram M10 promised compact firepower but delivered chaos, and its extreme rate of fire made it nearly uncontrollable, wasting ammunition and sacrificing precision. It was evaluated, rejected, and discarded without nostalgia. The SAS tolerated no compromises. As threats evolved, armor became common. Enemies no longer fell easily. This forced another shift, toward weapons capable of defeating protection. Systems like the MP7A1 emerged, small enough for vehicle crews and close protection teams, yet capable of punching through modern body armor. It reflected a new battlefield reality. Enemies were better equipped, harder to kill, and far less forgiving. Rifles and carbines began to dominate as missions demanded reach. In the jungles of Malaya, the lightweight M1 carbine was favored for its portability. It lacked raw stopping power, but speed mattered more than penetration in dense terrain. Mobility meant life. At the opposite extreme sat the Delisle carbine, one of the most unsettling weapons ever built. Firing subsonic ammunition through a massive integral suppressor, it was quieter than a cough. This was not a battlefield weapon. It was an execution tool reserved for missions where silence was absolute. The SAS has always been brutally pragmatic. Behind enemy lines, teams frequently carried captured AK-47 rifles. The sound blended naturally with enemy forces. Ammunition was abundant. Engagements raised no suspicion. Origin never mattered. Effect did. Standard service rifles earned their place through performance alone. The L1A1 self-loading rifle fired 7.62 NATO rounds that punched through cover lighter calibers could not. The G3 reinforced the value of rugged, full-power battle rifles. Later, lighter systems like the M16 gained acceptance. Though controversial at first, its lighter ammunition allowed operators to carry far more rounds, extending endurance during long operations. Short-barreled carbines such as the CAR-15 proved ideal for vehicle operations and urban fighting, particularly during Northern Ireland deployments. Compact variants like the Colt Commando excelled in confined spaces, even as their muzzle blast punished the shooter. Rifles like the HK-53 bridged the gap between submachine guns and full rifles, offering penetration without sacrificing maneuverability. Modernization brought the Colt Canada L119 series, selected after exhaustive trials. Superior manufacturing quality, improved barrels, and reliability under harsh conditions made it the new standard. Gas piston systems like the HK-416 further increased reliability in dust and sand, while larger caliber rifles such as the HK-417 and FN SCAR-H extended reach without abandoning familiar ergonomics. Sidearms evolved with the same cold logic. Early operators carried massive Webley revolvers in North Africa, trusting raw stopping power. The Enfield No. 2 revolver's hammerless design prevented snagging during parachute drops. The Browning High Power later dominated for decades, offering capacity and speed in a compact form. At the darkest edge of covert warfare sat weapons like the well rod. Purpose-built for assassination, it fired subsonic rounds through an oversized suppressor. It was not meant for firefights. It was meant to end lives quietly. And that silence would soon define an entirely new battlefield. Silence for the SAS. It was never an absence of action. It was a weapon. As covert operations expanded through the Cold War, the regiment refined an approach to combat that valued control over chaos and precision over spectacle. Sidearms, once secondary tools, became instruments of discretion. The Colt 1911, with its heavy .45 caliber punch, earned respect for its reliability and stopping power. 7 rounds were often enough when every shot was deliberate. Later, the Browning high power changed expectations entirely. 13 rounds in the magazine meant fewer reloads, faster follow-ups, and greater confidence in close protection and clandestine missions, where speed and certainty mattered. But when silence was mandatory, when even a gunshot would compromise an entire operation, the SAS turned to weapons purpose-built for the darkest tasks. And the Welrod pistol was not designed to win firefights. It was designed to end lives without witnesses. Bolt action, firing subsonic ammunition through an enormous integral suppressor, it produced a muted thud that barely carried beyond the room. It was a tool of assassination, not combat, and its existence underscored a brutal truth. Some missions demanded finality without noise, and the SAS was willing to build weapons to meet that demand. As the decades passed, revolvers gave way to semi-automatics, and semi-automatics gave way to modern polymers. The Glock series arrived with an almost unsettling simplicity. Lightweight, corrosion-resistant, and brutally reliable, Glock pistols functioned after immersion in salt water, burial in sand, or neglect that would disable more refined designs. Some operators preferred the heavier, but metal-framed SIG-P226 for its balance and accuracy, especially during counter-terror operations. The choice often came down to trust built through thousands of rounds fired in training and testing. Because in the SAS, personal preference was allowed only after performance was proven. While pistols handled the final meters of combat, rifles defined control over distance. Sniping, in particular, became a cornerstone of SAS dominance. Early Lee-Enfield rifles, with their smooth actions and 10-round magazines, allowed skilled marksmen to fire at astonishing rates. Trained snipers could deliver 30 aimed rounds per minute, a feat unmatched by most bolt-action rifles until semi-automatics became common. These early systems were not perfect, but they established a culture of marksmanship that would evolve relentlessly. Converted sniper variants, like the L42A1, carried the regiment through decades of conflict. Chambered in 7.62 NATO and fitted with telescopic sights, they remained effective well into the late 20th century. But the real revolution came with the accuracy International L96A1. Its aluminum chassis system eliminated the weaknesses of wooden stocks, maintaining zero in freezing cold, desert heat, and everything in between. This rifle did not merely improve accuracy, it changed expectations. Precision was no longer fragile. It was dependable. That evolution reached a terrifying peak with the L115A3, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. In Afghanistan, SAS snipers engaged targets at distances once considered impossible. Entire valleys fell under the control of a single rifle team. At those ranges, the enemy could not see the shooter, he could not hear the shot, and often could not even comprehend what had happened. The psychological impact was devastating. Movement slowed, commanders hesitated, morale collapsed. Precision, applied correctly, controlled terrain more effectively than any massed formation. Semi-automatic precision rifles added another dimension. Platforms like the Knight's Armament SR-25 allowed rapid follow-up shots, enabling designated marksmen and snipers to engage multiple targets in quick succession. Anti-material rifles such as the Accuracy International AW-50 extended reach beyond personnel, allowing SAS teams to disable vehicles, radar systems, and fortified positions from extreme distances. With multi-caliber systems like the AXMC, one rifle could become many, adapting to mission requirements in minutes rather than hours. But yet precision alone could not dominate every battlefield. Suppressive fire remained essential, and machine guns provided the raw force needed to maneuver under pressure. The SAS inherited a long relationship with machine guns, beginning with water-cooled Vickers guns that fired continuously for days without failure. Later, vehicle-mounted Vickers K guns brought devastating firepower to desert raids, shredding enemy positions in seconds. The FN Mag, affectionately known as the Gimpy, became one of the regiment's most trusted tools. Reliable, versatile, and brutally effective, it served across conflicts from the Falklands to Iraq. When heavier dominance was required, the M2 Browning delivered. Nearly a century old, it still punched through cover, vehicles, and morale alike. And when psychological impact mattered as much as physical destruction, the M134 minigun spoke with a voice that few could endure. 6 rotating barrels, thousands of rounds per minute. The sound alone often broke enemy resistance before contact was made. Shotguns filled a specialized but critical role. From early semi-automatic designs to modern gas-operated systems like the Benelli M4, these weapons excelled in breaching and close-quarters dominance. Doors, hinges, and barricades fell in seconds. In confined spaces, the shotgun ended fights with brutal efficiency. Explosive capability expanded reach even further. Grenade launchers such as the M79, M203, and later the M320 allowed individual operators to deliver indirect fire accurately. Vehicle-mounted systems like the MK19 saturated entire areas with high explosive rounds, denying ground and breaking formations. When armored threats appeared, anti-tank weapons answered. From early anti-tank rifles to modern fire-and-forget missile systems, the SAS adapted continuously, ensuring that no vehicle, bunker, or fortified position remained safe. Mortars extended influence beyond line of sight. Lightweight systems allowed small teams to call down indirect fire with lethal precision. Modern ammunition transformed mortars from area weapons into precision tools, guided by GPS and advanced fire control. Entire engagements could be shaped by rounds fired from positions the enemy never located. Explosives were as integral as firearms. Plastic explosives like C4 offered controlled demolition with remarkable stability. Claymore mines created lethal kill zones on command. Smoke grenades marked extraction points, concealed movement, or signaled aircraft. Flashbangs disoriented targets at the moment of entry, buying seconds that meant life or death. Every explosive had a purpose, and every purpose was rehearsed until instinctive. Breaching tools completed the picture. Sometimes technology mattered less than force. Sledgehammers shattered locks when speed mattered more than stealth. Hydraulic door openers pried entry silently when surprise was critical. Explosive charges blew open fortified doors in a single violent instant. The SAS chose the method that solved the problem fastest, regardless of elegance. Even-edged weapons retained relevance. The Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife was not a symbol. It was a solution. Thin, balanced, and lethal, it existed for moments when firearms failed or silence was mandatory. In those moments, training replaced technology, and discipline replaced noise. Across every era, one truth remained constant. The SAS never adapted itself to weapons. Weapons adapted to the SAS. Tools were chosen without sentiment and discarded without regret. Failure was not tolerated, excuses were irrelevant, and tradition meant nothing without performance. That philosophy shaped an arsenal unlike any other, one built not for parade grounds or doctrine manuals, but for the spaces between wars, where decisions were final and mistakes were fatal. And as warfare continued to evolve, the SAS prepared to evolve with it, carrying forward a legacy defined not by the weapons themselves, but by the ruthless clarity with which they were used. As warfare moved deeper into the 21st century, the battlefield itself began to change shape. Front lines blurred. Enemies no longer wore uniforms. Threats emerged from crowds, vehicles, rooftops, and unseen distances. For the SAS, this environment demanded more than better weapons. It demanded integration. Firearms could no longer exist in isolation. They had to function as part of a wider system of intelligence, surveillance, and rapid decision-making. Precision was no longer just mechanical. It became informational. Modern operations placed enormous emphasis on detection before contact. Optics evolved from simple magnified scopes into complex systems combining thermal imaging, night vision, laser range finding, and ballistic computation. A modern SAS operator could see in total darkness, identify heat signatures through foliage, and calculate firing solutions in seconds. The weapon became only the final link in a chain that began with information. Whoever saw first usually won. This shift transformed how sniper teams operated. No longer isolated hunters, they became nodes in a wider reconnaissance and targeting network. A single observation team could fix enemy positions, guide air assets, call indirect fire, or eliminate high-value targets with a single round. The rifle itself, whether bolt-action or semi-automatic, was now supported by satellites, drones, and real-time intelligence feeds. Precision warfare had become networked warfare. Urban combat pushed this integration even further. Cities compressed distances while multiplying threats. Windows became firing points. Vehicles became weapons. Crowds became concealment. In this chaos, rifles like the HK-416 and L119A2 proved invaluable. Shorter barrels improved maneuverability indoors while maintaining accuracy and reliability. Suppressors reduced signature, protecting hearing and preserving communication in confined spaces. Every element of the weapon system existed to give the operator clarity in environments designed to create confusion. Close quarters battle remained brutally unforgiving. Shot placement mattered more than volume. Training emphasized discrimination, knowing when not to fire as much as when to pull the trigger. This reality reinforced the importance of pistols as last resort survival tools. Compact handguns like the Glock 19 allowed concealment during plainclothes operations while maintaining lethal capability. The pistol was never the primary weapon, but when everything else failed, it was the difference between escape and capture. Vehicle operations introduced another layer of complexity. Convoys faced ambush from all directions, and weapons had to be accessible, controllable, and devastating at short notice. Compact carbines, personal defense weapons, and vehicle-mounted machine guns provided overlapping fields of fire. The goal was not to win prolonged engagements, but to break contact violently and move. Speed remained survival. Heavy weapons retained their relevance even in this modern landscape. Machine guns anchored defensive positions and dominated open terrain. Grenade launchers denied cover and forced movement. Anti-armor systems ensured that no vehicle could operate with impunity. These tools were not used indiscriminately. They were applied surgically, often to create effects rather than body counts. A destroyed vehicle could block a road. A suppressed position could enable maneuver. Firepower was a means, not an end, and explosives continued to shape the battlefield in ways firearms could not. Controlled demolitions opened access routes. Precision charges destroyed infrastructure selectively. Improvised threats were countered with specialized breaching techniques refined through hard experience. The SAS treated explosives with the same respect as firearms, tools to be mastered, not feared. As technology advanced, so did the psychological dimension of warfare. The SAS understood that fear could be more effective than force. The knowledge that a sniper could strike unseen from extreme range altered enemy behavior. The sound of a minigun or the detonation of a precision-guided round reshaped decisions instantly. Modern warfare was fought as much in the mind as on the ground. Yet despite all this advancement, the core philosophy never changed. And the SAS did not chase technology for its own sake. New weapons were tested relentlessly. Many were rejected. Only those that proved themselves under stress were adopted. Innovation was welcomed, but only when it served the mission. Complexity was tolerated only if it delivered real advantage. This philosophy extended to training. Operators were expected to master their weapons completely. Muscle memory replaced conscious thought. Under stress, there was no time for hesitation. Every action had to be automatic, every decision deliberate. Weapons were tools, but the operator remained the decisive element. Over decades of conflict, this mindset produced an arsenal that evolved continuously without losing its identity. From crude submachine guns to digitally integrated sniper systems, the SAS adapted without sentimentality. What worked stayed. What failed disappeared. The regiment carried no nostalgia into battle. The true power of the SAS arsenal was never about firepower alone. It was about control. Control of space, control of tempo, control of decision-making. A single shot could halt an advance. A suppressed rifle could freeze a position. A sudden breach could collapse resistance before it formed. Violence was applied precisely, deliberately, and without excess. In the end, the weapons of the SAS tell a story not of escalation, but of refinement, not louder, but quieter, not bigger, but smarter. The evolution from brute force to calculated precision reflects a deeper understanding of warfare itself. Modern conflict is not won by who fires the most rounds, but by who makes the fewest mistakes. Yet the SAS remains at the forefront of this reality because it never confuses tools with purpose. Rifles, pistols, machine guns, explosives, all are temporary solutions to permanent problems. The real weapon has always been the mindset behind them. Disciplined, adaptable, and utterly unforgiving of failure. That is why the British Special Air Service has endured. Not because of any single gun, but because of the cold clarity with which it chooses to use them.